Welcome, welcome, wonderful souls. Welcome to Hey Boo, a witches podcast, where the mystical dances with the mundane, where the ethereal meets the earthly. We are your enchanting guides. I'm Meika Cooper, and I'm joined by my fellow seeker of the unseen, Kristen Schaefer.
Thank you for tuning in to Hey Boo. Our purpose? To illuminate the marvels of this moment, to unveil the enchantment woven into the fabric of everyday existence.
That's right, because in the tapestry of life, threads of magic are shimmering all around us.
You feel those beautiful sixth sense tingles like we do? You've come to the right place to let your inner witch unfurl her wings. Let the wisdom of the moon guide your steps, and let the whispers of the universe ignite your spirit. Remember, you are magic incarnate, and this podcast is the incantation that calls it forth.
Where we unite as modern mystics, cosmic sisters, and as believers in the extraordinary. Where we illuminate the mundane with the radiance of the mystical.
Let's journey together across continents and constellations as we embrace the magic that weaves our stories together.
Are you ready to embark on this voyage, dear boos? The stars await, the cauldron bubbles, and the magic beckons.
Tune in,
turn on, and let the enchantment begin.
Hey, Boo.
Hey, Boo.
We were just in Peru, and man, it has been a minute. It's been a minute. But you know what?
Oh.
That's just kind of like how the year has been. It's been January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August.
Yeah, exactly. And it's 2025.
Yeah.
I can't. I mean, Peru in Peru was amazing. I mean, what a journey, what a trip. Yes, it's like it's one of those things that just like clicked a lot of things into place. I think I'm assuming everybody who went. I know it did for me. It's like I could speak for myself, but
yeah, and it's still happening. Like
for sure.
To the minute, there's something that I've experienced since coming back. I mean, we got back on the 10th or 11th. We left on the 10th, and it's just magnificent to see how all the puzzle pieces are coming together and all of the cues and listening to all the whispers of the universe. And as you answer them or acknowledge it, and then it just opens up a whole nother pathway. And so when I spoke to you in Kaleo prior to the trip about what was my intention for coming, one of my reasons was the magic. And
yes.
It show up. It shows up. Sometimes I think it only shows you as much as your brain can almost handle, but like it's just been so overwhelming in a good way, and in just such like a mystical, beautiful, unbelievable way. And so I have to say, a hard time when people want to ask me about my trip, because I don't even know where to start. And I also was still processing, but it just felt like there was so much information and you could go in 1,000 little directions and just get lost with that share. But yeah, I mean, the magic, man, it just amplifies. And the one thing I want to say is a trip like that just levels you up in a way that you just cannot go back to the old version of yourself.
Right. Exactly. Well, I think Peru itself and the people and the culture and the land have so much magic just built in that they haven't forgotten, because I feel like we all do, but many of us have forgotten, especially in the Western world. We've forgotten that connection to the earth magic and Mother Nature herself and just our own powers. And I think the Peruvian culture has done a much better job than the Western culture of really remembering that and practicing it. And then you get these indigenous shamans who are, I believe it's like watching Michael Jordan in basketball, watching these guys and females work their magic. It's like I really feel like somehow the universe like gave us access to these like the most incredible shamans, healers on the planet, and we get to be a part of what they bring to the table. And so I just feel so blessed to have been introduced to this world, that world, their world, which becomes our world, which we get to like, take those sacred parts and share and bring it back and change ourselves and our, immediate world around us. So it's just like, yeah, the magic is incredible.
And as you were talking, the other part that felt, I mean, as we continue to talk about it, so many nuggets keep coming up, but the community. And I think what is so eye-opening about that is, coming from the States where it feels very divisive, to go to a country and we'll get into this more, but like one of my shares was the level of community and openness, and how even like a passerby could come into our circle and have this amazing experience with us. And there's no like, who are you? We don't know you, you know, like it's not closed off, it's open. So, you know, the message to me is like, God, we're all made of cosmic stardust. I don't know what that woman's beliefs or political values were, whatever, but like you just, there's just an acceptance and
Yeah.
just an overall like vibe of love and community that I think the Peruvians just nail. like,
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
like even if you're from the other side of the world, you belong there.
Exactly. It's like they're looking at your soul. They're not looking at, like you
Yes.
said, your beliefs or your political views. It's just like, well, oh, you're a fellow human. And let me like really look at you and see you and understand you from that like soul level instead of like all the other masks or facades or, beliefs that kind of get in the way a little bit of that.
Yeah, it just restores my faith in humanity because you can see that it's still there. You know, like
Yeah.
that there's a community that still gets it and was able to remind at least me coming back here that we're not different at all. And we have to be
Yeah.
like why we are connected. And even when you might judge someone who doesn't have the same beliefs or values of you, like you have more in common than you do the things that you're trying to find that are different. So it's yeah, that was just sort of one of the things that I downloaded, you know, just in the time after coming home, you know, because it's very easy to get caught back up into the whole, especially right now with the election
Yeah.
and really how we've discussed that the medicine is how now you react and how you
Hmm.
absorb or don't absorb some of the information and people personalities and all the things that might have been a rub prior to going on the trip. And yeah,
Yeah.
that's the work. The work is like, how much of that did you get? And how can you shift your own perception and your own perspective and your own reaction? And how we translate that back to our everyday life, like the life we had prior to going on that trip. Like, how do we now amplify, or how do I amplify what I felt there in my life back home? Um,
Yeah.
so that's part of I think the integration after a trip like that. But man,
Yeah, for
like I
sure.
feel like we're brushing over so many other things. So um,
Right, right. But I think that's really important. And it's funny that you brought that up because I was like up against that today, like with like just conversations that were happening like in my family, like political stuff. And it's just like you can see like how there's so many people wanting sides and are you on this team, you're on that team. And I was just like, my only response was we're all on the same team. Just remember, like no matter what your view is or what my view is, like we're all on the same team. Like let's always remember that. And we're never not gonna be, and I feel like that's kind of like that message that that woman gave, it's just like it doesn't matter. It
it
doesn't
was
matter. Yeah, it's we're all here together on the same human team.
yeah. Yeah, my main word from her was liberation, and that also applies to this as well. It's like a liberation of your mind, and like
Yes,
I feel like everybody wants to label every goddamn thing, you
I
know?
know.
It's like you
Totally.
don't have to psychoanalyze everything. Like just why can't things just be as they are? Obviously, common decency is really important, love and respect. And if you're operating from that level, just be responsible for your own behavior. Like let's stop
Totally.
judging everybody else. Everyone is on their own path. Obviously, there's embarrassment you can feel because it's maybe not something you would do, but to sit there and then judge that says something too. I just feel like bringing it back to brass tacks. The baseline is love, respect, and honesty, integrity. You can't go wrong. Have personal responsibility for that in your own space. Like don't worry about other people's shit. You
Yeah,
know?
exactly. Totally. Totally. 100%. So when you like think about the magic that was experienced in Peru, what would you say like your most magical moment was, or like the most kind of aha, like maybe it's not even a moment, maybe it's just like a teaching or something that like you have like, okay, I'm different now because of this.
Yeah, I actually, so this is going to be a long response because
Yeah.
I also kind of want to address that it's not all butterflies and rainbows and like cosmic, mind-blowing, la la la.
Yeah.
And maybe we should explain what what we did and when, but I feel like the trip centered around four ceremonies.
Hmm.
The first two sitting with Mama Ayahuasca and this beautiful Maestro Pablito from the Shipibu tribe in the Amazon. I don't know if you want to add anything else that you've sat with him more than I have, but just such a special being.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he is, I've sat with many different shaman, and he is just like the most incredible human. He's like a baby, that like his innocence and his purity of love. It's like he's like a baby in this like almost 80-year-old body.
Totally.
He's
That's
just like so innocent and loving and caring, and the time that he takes with each person, I've never seen anything like it. I mean, I've seen like, shamans working, but he will go and sit and sing to each person individually, and understand your personal journey and remember it. That to me is just unbelievable. I'm like, wow, the level of just memory itself of like what happened during
yeah.
that night.
That was the same characterization that I would have as well. Like he had the essence of a little boy in a elderly man's body, just like the
Mhm.
joy that kind of emanated from him and the energy and the light. It was very beautiful to witness. And then on top of it, to experience his Icaros, which is what you talked about with the song. The
Mhm.
song is very specific to each person's soul,
Mhm.
spirit journey in this lifetime. And he would sit and just sing to you. It's just kind of like your own movie theme song almost.
Totally. Like if you were gonna like have a laboratory that makes medicine that is just for you, it's like that's what his Icaros are. They're like a sound, of vibration, lyrics that are the healing medicine. Which is so I didn't understand it because I was like, okay, shamans sing Icaros, and that's like, okay, so they sing. It's not just a song. It's like healing vibrations and I didn't understand it until it wasn't working. I felt like the medicine wasn't working. I was like, okay, I still feel all this anxiety, all this pain, and he came over and he's like, let the Icaros in. And I somehow understood how to like let the music into my body. And then my entire body healed. This was last year when we went, because I didn't actually take ayahuasca this time, but my entire body healed. Like I could barely walk, and then I could walk 10 miles the next day. It was like those Icaros that he was singing were the healing medicine, which
Like,
was just
yeah,
really,
I was hearing the term song alchemist.
yes,
That,
yeah, I love that.
yeah, it's not an actual terminology, but I'm like, I feel like that's what it was. Like his healing and medicine was through this beautiful chanting that he customized for you. So yeah, so just as a highlight, like just to brush over and we'll get into it, but yeah, we had the two ayahuasca ceremonies back to back in a maloca. It was a man-made built hut, not traditional, right? Like traditional would have
Right.
been a very more insulated
Yeah.
structure. And so what was really funny about Maestro Pablito is that he was joking that whoever built this maloca turned it into a refrigerator.
Yeah,
Box.
exactly.
It was very cold.
I wouldn't change a whole lot, but I would change the temperature in the room, I think.
Yeah, it's winter in Peru, so layers are really important.
Yeah.
Anyway, so then after that, we had a day off or so, and then we moved into a different part of Peru, and we experienced two Wachuma ceremonies, which we'll definitely get into because those were so beautiful as well. But I just wanted to mention that so that I could just sort of provide some context for my first experience, which tying back to what I was saying about how like it's not all butterflies and rainbows, was that my first experience with ayahuasca was actually very hard. It was I remember saying I had my ass handed to me. Like it was like night of the soul. I had a lot of self-loathing because in that moment where I was in the medicine, I had realized that I had voluntarily previously donated my vessel, my body to help transmute other people's energy that does not serve them anymore. And it's painful. It doesn't feel good. It was so much work. I just remember that first night feeling like I was hard laboring. It was very draining. It felt very like I felt very taxed emotionally, mentally, just in all the ways, and physically because my body's very kinetic. So when I hear his ecros, I can't stop moving my body. It's almost like I experience what it's like to have severe ADHD because my body will not stop moving. It's like a twitching in my muscles, and they just have to like they just activate with every sort of note he's hitting. And I know a knowing that like every time he was singing someone Ikros, I could feel what he was talking about. I could see it, I could feel it. And so as an example, when he was singing your Ikros right next to me, I was wailing because I was letting all of the suffering and trauma of your ancestors out of my body, a huge release of ancestral trauma and just stored dense energy. And I just remember being like, this is not mine. Like, I know this is not mine because I could feel it. So
Yeah.
I felt very selfish in my thoughts because I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. Don't make me do this anymore. I want out. I want to rip up the contract. I don't want to do this anymore. This is very painful. Cut to our integration circle the next day with the shaman. I shared this and he mentioned that I have a natural ability to help others. And so as he was holding my hand when he came to me and he sang me my Ikros, he said that Mama Ayahuasca was giving me all the strength I needed to help others. And after that night, I didn't have the same experience I had the first night. So I didn't suffer. Like the next night, I didn't even feel anything actually.
Yeah. Were you still doing the transmutation, or it didn't appear that way in the ceremony the next night?
The next night, I didn't feel a single thing.
Yeah.
Oh no, but I was still transmuting because I was outside. I was on the grass, putting hands, feet, knees, body, and I was just like moving energy through my body. I knew I was doing that. I was shaking stuff off, but I didn't feel it at all. Like the intensity that I had felt the night before, it didn't feel like suffering. Like it didn't feel like exhausting or I just felt more in control of my body where that first night I felt like this is not yours. We're going to use you tonight, you know? And I think I got mad about that because I was like, I want to be of service to humanity and my community, but I also don't want to suffer myself, you know? Like it's almost that concept of like, you can't give from an empty cup. And I felt so empty. I just felt so
Yeah.
like, so, I
Feel
just,
like you were doing that, and do you feel like that was a part of you, like that you knew that that was part of why you were here, to be a transmuter of energy
it was very,
before?
yeah, it was very obvious. That was the other intention. It was like having clarity about my purpose in life. And
Mhm.
in that moment, and on this trip, that was my purpose. And
Yeah.
so I remember joking with Kaleo the next morning, like, this whole luxurious shamanic retreat is such a farce. I go, you lured three-dimensional brain in. I'm supposed to be here. I'm supposed to do this, but I felt bamboozled, you know, like the next morning. I felt like, what the fuck? Like,
Because it is work. It's like, yes, we are going on a beautiful, adventure, a beautiful vacation where we're staying in really nice places and we're visiting, beautiful sacred sites. And you're doing a lot of really deep, heavy lifting, healing along the way. So it's like the journey, where most people might have like a Mai Tai or a margarita in one hand as they're going from one spot to the other. You were not doing that. You know what I mean? It's like you're processing. Like you may be on your way to Machu Picchu, but you just had a ceremony the night before, so you're processing. You know what I mean? So it's not like this. I mean, there's a lot of joy and a lot of fun, but there's also, and I do have to say, this was the most challenging trip. Probably it's hard to say. It was definitely a very extremely powerful transformative trip, but it was also one of the most challenging trips, probably the most challenging trip that we have had, just based on people getting sick and just things happening that just could happen on any vacation that you go on, but it just it made it very challenging in a lot of ways.
well, the thing is, for someone who hasn't been before, like, we don't know what to expect. So from your
Yeah.
perspective, you could say it's the most challenging, but we don't know that.
Yep,
Well, it's
exactly.
part of the process. I mean, I know there was someone who was there that, who had been there before, but it's just like taking medicine. You don't have the same experience twice. having been there a few times, this is your third time, right?
Yeah.
And you have something to compare it against. I don't. So
Yeah.
it was beautiful. I mean, I only share that particular moment because a big sort of theme, overarching theme with the trip was contrast and clarity. And that was like
Yeah.
one of the downloads that I shared in one of our integration circles is that and people shared that as you felt sick, God, it made you appreciate feeling healthy again. Or like the temperature differences from one minute to the next. Either you're like cold and it's windy 1 second, or the sun comes out and you're hot and you're taking your jacket off. And so there was always that contrast for the clarity. It was like appreciating warmth, or appreciating coolness, or appreciating your health, or all the different things. Like it was just kind of like a constant wave of experience that you're going through from minute to minute.
Yeah. And that's life. And I do have this feeling, and in some ways I hope that I'm incorrect, but I have this feeling that we're going through one of the biggest transformative times in history, and that we're creating lots of things are crumbling, lots of old ways that are not working anymore are starting to fall and crumble. And there's things that are new that are in the process of being birthed, and I eventually think we will get to a place in humanity where it's a beautiful new earth. But in the meantime, it may be some pretty significant challenges that we go through, and when it's like out of chaos you get the order, right? So it's like I feel like we're kind of headed in that direction. And I feel like the possibility of why this trip seemed to be one of the most challenging is because I think for me, the lesson was, how are you when things don't go exactly as planned or don't go in your mind what should be the best case scenario? It's like, okay, how do we keep our calm? How do we still show up as our best self even when things are not, the outside world is not looking like we want it to look? And that for me was like a huge learning lesson. And I think it's one that is probably going to be very helpful as we move forward. Everybody on the trip got that lesson, I think. And I think that we're going to need that, because we are going to have to figure that out for ourselves. Like, how are we when the world maybe looks a little unstable and looks a little like, what's happening here? Can we remain in our equanimity?
Yeah, that leads into, for me, another theme of an acceptance of what is. There's a whole dialogue over how much you actually have within control of your life, that your soul, and this is shared based on other people's feedback with their journeys. I hope it's okay that we share this. I won't mention names or anything, but that your spirit or your soul has predetermined the experience that it wants in this lifetime, whether it's terrible, awful, challenging things. There are things that you get the lessons from and the experience from, or if they're beautiful, and like that's what you hold on to. And whatever may have happened or will happen in this lifetime, or who you lose, or that sort of thing, that it was all kind of pre-written before the spirit entered this vessel, and that's what your spirit wanted to experience in this lifetime. So I think for me, it gave me a sense of liberation and freedom over what I need to figure out to do with myself in this world. It's like a contrast of like trying to deprogram myself, but also be a contributing member of society, and how you pay the bills and look after your family and that sort of thing. So I think there's like this really delicate balance of trying to remove all those paradigms and those things that have completely formulated in your brain about how you're supposed to be and what you're supposed to do. And then this understanding that really it all will lay out exactly the way it should. So don't stress about like you like, there's only so much
Oh,
to do.
totally. And I wonder, because I always say this, it's my truth, but it doesn't mean it's the truth.
Yeah.
And I kind of have that sense too, that everything is, or a lot of things, like the big things are kind of like laid out already for your soul's lessons. But I feel like the free will and the choice is how you choose to view it and how you choose to respond or react, or, to it is, that I think that can make the difference between living a life that feels like heaven or a life that feels like
Right.
hell.
Absolutely. It's totally mindset. And I also think one of the things I've learned too is like it's following the breadcrumbs.
Yeah.
So as opportunities present them to you, like if whether you decide to go after that thing that excites you, or even if it scares you, and to do it and to see what happens, because it just opens new pathways. Or if you stay safe and you're like,
Yeah.
oh, I've never done that, I don't want to do it, I don't want to embarrass myself. And the example I'll give is that this Native woman that we keep referring to during our Wachuma ceremony, she was just walking in this area and she asked the shaman if she could join. And at first I'm like, who's that? But what I very quickly learned from her was she was just the most inspiring soul I had ever seen, in the sense that she was so in her body. She was so comfortable with who she is in this lifetime, and danced so freely and was so who she was, that I wanted to take a part of that and learn how to do that for myself. And so for me, coming home, I love to dance. I feel like it's just part of my being. Like, I just love to move. I said I'm kinetic, but I normally gravitate towards like choreographed dancing. And so the idea of freeform dance freaks me out a lot. Like, I'm not comfortable with that because I'm not comfortable in my body. So one of the things that was presented to me when I came home was to go to this ecstatic dance in LA. It's in Venice. And my God, you and Kaleo would freaking love it. It's just
I love
fun.
it.
You've got headphones on. There's an amazing DJ. There's a host. I'm like, oh my God, I feel like I found my people. You're just dancing in the surf of the ocean with like music. And it's just,
Oh,
it's a
that
safe
sounds
space.
like heaven. That sounds like heaven.
Are you
And
kidding?
you were like, I don't know, this is totally out of my comfort zone. Like, I don't know if I want to do this,
Right. No,
Not
I
to.
honestly, I
Yeah.
was mortified. I don't want to make a fool out of myself, but I'm like, who cares? I don't even know these people. But it was funny because if you saw me in the beginning, I had my hat on, my glasses, and I was just like holding my hat. And then by the end, my arms are flailing and I'm like doing my own, it was like,
I love it.
it was so liberating. I showed myself that I could go there and I could be so comfortable in this skin and not freaking care. Who cares? No one freaking cares.
Exactly.
No,
Exactly. I
it's,
love that.
yeah.
And my guess is that's probably just because you started the conversation with the transmutation. That is probably a huge part of your ability to transmute is through dance. That's probably why it shows up in ceremony and your legs are moving around and you feel like you can't sit still. It's probably part of your gift, how to actually move that energy through.
But yeah, so even just sort of clicking there for me, I have to learn how to do this, because if I'm going to continue how to do it, I need to be comfortable moving it out of my body.
Yes. Yeah, totally. Totally. What a gift. Wow, that's so awesome. I just keep like wondering if, because your gift is transmutation, a lot of people come to ayahuasca, in my experience, to get their purpose. That's like a huge theme. That was my first or initial reason too. Why am I here? And she just mapped it out for me. This is who you are. This is why you're here. This is what you are to do. And sometimes it's like that. Sometimes it's like a specific job. Like, one of the people that we were on the journey with was asking the same question. And she's like, oh, I'm supposed to be a producer. That's what I am supposed to do. So it's like cut and dry. And for you, and I also got a message the last time after I was like, okay, what do I do with that? You're the transmuter. So to me, a lot of people are like, I want to know exactly what my purpose is, but like where I'm supposed to go with this. You know what I mean? And I feel like for you, you got this message of you don't have to worry. You will always be taken care of. You just kind of see what's presented and go there and just keep going there and keep going there. And so I'm just so excited to see the places that you get called to. You know what I mean? Because it might not appear, you think like, oh, I'm the spiritual person. It's going to be some sort of a yoga retreat, or you know what I mean? Like something like that. But it's like, who knows? You could become the CEO of some corporation because you're supposed to transmute that energy. You know what I mean? Like it'll just be really interesting to
Yeah.
see what kind of things a transmuter gets called to.
Right. Yeah. And that's exactly it. It's like trusting the process and not trying to figure out what that answer is immediately. Having it mapped out for you in the way that's step one, you're going to go home and apply for XYZ. Like it just doesn't happen that way. And so part of what I referenced earlier is like following those breadcrumbs. So when things are presenting themselves to you multiple times, listen to it. do something with it. Like if you feel called to it, if you feel excited about it. And so yeah, I think it's that. And the hard part for me is every time someone from my corporate world asks like, how's the job search going or whatever, and not letting that have a charge with me anymore. Like, it's kind of an annoying question, to be honest. I would tell you if I had something, but I don't know. I mean, I don't, you know, one of the messages I got that first night was no more tech. It was so loud. It was no more
Yeah.
tech. And I'm like, okay, even though I came home and I've had recruiters reach out and I'll even humor them and send them my resume, it doesn't go anywhere. I'm trying to keep an open mind. Maybe there's things that are going to be presented to you that will help bridge the gap. But
Sure.
when I hear no more tech, that was really clear. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah. And then, you know, the other thing that I heard that we've discussed previously is in my egos, I kept hearing Hawaii. And I'm like, is he saying Hawaii? And I know you said you heard
I
him.
heard it loud and clear because I was like, wait, I know I get the Hawaii messages. Is he singing mine to her?
Right. No, but it like kept coming up. And so even when I left the Maloka and I was back in my room and I had my own journey again, I went back there. The medicine waved right through my body again. Mama Ayahuasca just said Hawaii. My brain, even though I was on the medicine, was like, what are you talking about? My son just got into a new school. We're so anchored in Santa Monica. We have a dog and a bearded dragon. Like I was going to all why we shouldn't. Maybe it's not even like that we're actually moving there. Maybe there's a cohabitation, which I would love. But who knows? Like I'm just staying open to whatever that next little flag is when it comes up for me to be like, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Well, you stay open to that Hawaii because it's I can share some things which I can't share right now, but
Yeah, of
we've had some phone calls since we've been back
course you
about
have. Of course you
things
have.
dialing in that direction. And it will all take, it will take several years to have you know what I mean? So I feel like it's just going to be divine timing with our kids and where they are and, how old they are. And
I think that's the other thing too, is like when you get these kind of messages, not to grip so tightly on them, there's an acceptance of like, okay, this is part of the plan. Like you don't need to know when it's going to happen. It'll happen when it's ready. Um,
exactly.
yeah, and just to follow up with the whole dynamic with work, abundance and that sort of thing, the other message she gave me that was really loud and also very humorous was that I will always be taken care of. And I think that's like when I say I, it's actually all of us will always be taken care of because
Yeah.
I had this realization that in one of my previous journeys, I kept getting the message that I am Pachamama. In my brain, I'm like, I can't be the only one. That's a lot of pressure. I don't want that. That's too much pressure. But
Yeah.
now I have the understanding that it's a collective you, not just me. We are all
Well,
Pachamama.
that's something that's really important, I think, to highlight because there are people that I have seen, and I've seen it on like several different accounts, and it usually gets worked out later because people will have the realization, but sometimes not. I've seen people get kind of stuck in that.
Like the ego of like they're the
Yeah,
chosen one.
they are you
Because
know what I
that's
mean?
how the message comes through. It's so
Yes, it
like
does. And it takes something to be like, okay, wait, this is, but if you I think if you kind of tend towards more like the narcissistic side, which I don't know why people come in like that, but they do, it really feeds that. And I've seen people get caught up in the I am this, and you call me princess queen of the world because I am, you know what I mean? And my response is yes, you are. And so are we all,
yes, yeah, we're all the
like
same stardust.
exactly, exactly. But sometimes that's a hard one, and because it feels good to be the one,
Actually,
it
but
feels
but
good.
right. But when I heard, I was like, I don't want that. That sounds like way too much pressure. Like I was like, no,
Yeah.
no. Like so, yeah. The way that how you interpret it also is like
Yeah,
such a big part of it, which is why the integration is so important. And so
exactly.
Vanessa in our group helped connect that because I was sharing that, and I was like, why would I be the only one? She's like, we all are. I'm like, thank God, thank God. I'm
Yeah,
like, it took someone just to say it out loud for me for it to
yeah,
like.
yeah, totally.
And I'm grateful for her for saying that. And then these new friendships I've encountered since coming home, I'm like, where have you been? Like,
Yeah.
and how they've opened up doors. And I'm just flabbergasted at how the stepping stones just appear.
Well, I think it's frequency too. It's like,
Yeah.
you take the medicine, like you come into ceremony and you're at a certain frequency, and there's no better or worse. It's just a different frequency. And then you clear and you realize and you remember, and then you're at this other frequency, and then you start like pulling in things that are in alignment with that frequency. That's why all of a sudden, we go to Peru and we've had this Hawaii thing in our scope for a while. It's coming back again. It's like it's all opening up again because it's that frequency. Like you got the message. It's like things are starting to open up, and it's the same with your new friend or friends. It's like you're probably vibrating at a similar level. It's like, oh, you've been right at the same school all along, but I haven't seen you until I come back from this trip, and there you are.
Yeah, she's so funny. She's like, we just smelled it on each other. The moment we walked, like we just smelled it on each other. I'm so grateful for this woman. She's great. But yeah, you're right. And like I want to emphasize that it's not better or worse than anyone else. It's like I think to me, it's a liberation of your mind. It's getting out of your head. So when it's not cluttered with all these expectations and paradigms and what you think and how you think the world should be, and for yourself and for other people, then you can shift your radio station to something else that is more, it's lighter and more fulfilling. Like I feel like when you get stuck in that like matrix loop of order, and stifles like your ability to hear anything else.
Totally. I remember coming back from my first ayahuasca ceremony, coming back to my old job. The frequency that I was before, that was fitting. It was like the perfect job for me. It felt really in alignment with my purpose and who I was. And then you start to shed certain layers and remember certain parts, and you are different. And there's nothing wrong with who you were or the places that you maybe were attracted to, but it doesn't fit anymore. I just remember going back to my old job and feeling, oh, this feels like a prison. How was I here for so long? This just feels so heavy, and like it just does not feel like me anymore. And having to make a shift. And that happens a lot when people take the medicine to remember and release and heal, and nothing wrong with the old self, or even people who were in alignment with that old self. But you might come back and you know what? This relationship isn't what it was, or there's new relationships that appear out of thin air. It's just jobs change. Like it just happens. It's a healing process.
Life prior to served a purpose for that moment.
Oh, for sure. Like, it was the stepping stone. It was the launch pad, yeah, it had to happen. For me, I think about like my old teaching days. I got so much out of it. I met the most amazing kids, and I got to understand the genius of these people with autism and like with beautiful souls. And there's so much that they taught me about myself and about the world, and it's amazing, and I would never take it back. But at some point it just started to actually make me miserable, and it launched me into, if I were like really happy and everything was just rainbows and butterflies at that job, I probably wouldn't have had my first plant medicine experience, because there wasn't anything like that really launched me into like, something's not right here, and I got to figure out what it is, and that was my launch pad, because things became very miserable in a place where I was used to be really happy. So yeah, those things definitely serve a purpose for sure.
Right. And that's how when something's also played out. You should be always striving to operate from a point of excitement. You're not supposed to live life robotically. You're just getting through the day and surviving. It makes me sad when I hear people doing that, because that's also a mindset. Even just be comfort, because that's all they know. I know what that feels like too, to be in an environment or a space where it was comfortable because it's what I knew. But once you realize what else is out there, then you have a thirst for more. So it's just breaking out of that initial cycle to know that you have better for yourself always.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I mean, it's very scary. I mean, it can be very scary. I'm sure it's not scary for everybody, but it is like, I mean, I know it's scary for me because it's unknown. We are also so programmed. There is that control and what feels comfortable. And when I broke out of my job, people were like, what are you doing? What's wrong with you? Are you sick? Are you okay? You've cracked a little bit, right? Because you think that you're gonna quit your comfortable job and go. And at the time I was doing mediumship full time. They're like, that's not going to pay the bills. That's really nice. It's a nice idea, but led into other things. I just, like you said earlier, following the breadcrumbs. But it can be hard, especially for, people who have just a different kind of outside the box, maybe skill set, for the mediums and the shamans and the healers, where it's not like there's not a straight path to, like, if you're going to be a doctor, it's like, okay, I know what to do here. I go to med school and I take that course. But for a lot of people, I'm seeing this as like a common theme with the people that we work with. It's like, okay, I have this thing and I have these skill sets that are totally unique to me. And the imposter syndrome comes up. Is anybody going to need this? Does anybody want this? It can be very scary to break out of that kind of, I mean, I hate to say it, but it feels very like kind of matrixy, just that like locked in
It's being risk
career.
averse. It's being risk.
Yeah,
It's not. It's like the unpredictability. And
sure.
so when people project that to you, it's their own worries, because you're kind of defying the laws of what we've been programmed to understand. This is what you do, XYZ. I hope we get to a place in our society and the world that schools focus on individual gifts and how to foster them to be the best versions of yourself to contribute to society, that we don't all fit into this SAT box. I'm so over that. And so that's why I'm grateful that we have our son in a school that seems to have more progressive thinking and more project-based learning. Like, I wish every child had that opportunity. It's there. I just think it just needs to be fostered and understood better. And this kind of leads into when people have asked me about my trip. I'm not here to convince anyone of anything. What I experienced was my experience. And whether you believe in what I'm sharing or not is your lens. And, there's been a level of discernment about like how much I share, because it's also beautiful and magical. And I like want everyone to know, but I also don't want to have a debate with someone. The moment I smell, I'm just like,
Yeah,
I'm good.
it was great. It was fun. It was fun. You should go.
It was good. It was beautiful.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Machu Picchu. Woo.
Lots of clouds.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah,
Oh
but
my.
I'm also here for the people that want to know more, because I think it's such a beautiful form of therapy. For me, I had such debilitating levels of anxiety, and to know that I'm so on the other side of that I didn't have to keep suffering in that way. I want that for everyone. I want people to know that you don't have to take pharmaceuticals to feel better. There's other pathways to healing and getting out of that mindset. So that's
100.
why I also am simultaneously putting myself out there, but I'm trying to be very discerning. I can try to sense out if somebody's into it or not, and if they're not,
Yeah.
hey.
Yeah, and it's not for everybody. So some people will be like, oh, what, because it's maybe not for you, but the people that it is for, I feel like, I mean, this might sound sort of strange, but I feel like the plants are actually behind the scenes running the show. When I first did ayahuasca, before I did it, I remember taking like an anthropology class in college, and I had heard of ayahuasca, but it was never on my radar. And I was an experimenter with lots of things, and especially in my 20s. But ayahuasca was never a thing that I even really considered, because I didn't really know much about it. And then when it was time to do it, it was almost in every conversation. I felt like I could not turn my head without running into somebody who was telling me about an ayahuasca experience. And then it became, okay, what is this?
Yeah.
And then I went to Agape, and on every chair, there were 3 books of the same copy, Shit the Moon Said, which was written by Jerry, who runs Rhythmia, an ayahuasca center in Costa Rica. And it was his story. And so I was like, okay, I'm
I love that
coming.
title, by the way, Shit the Moon.
I know. Oh, it's hilarious. You should read it. It's a really quick read. It's hilarious. Like, his story is unbelievable, unbelievable about the shifts and transformations of who he was before to who he is now after ayahuasca. It's a different person in such a beautiful way. He's such a beautiful soul. Hearing his story, I can't even believe he was that guy who he is very inspirational. And it's very inspirational too for people with addictions, because that's another thing that I see. And one of the people who came with us to Peru was one of Kaleo's really good friends. And I won't say his name, but he shares this freely. But this was not his first ayahuasca experience, but he had just done ayahuasca for the first time, maybe like 5 months ago. And when he went in, he was having all kinds of problems with alcohol, and nothing worked. He went from rehab to rehab and went to all the best rehabs and couldn't kick it. And one night with ayahuasca, and he was done. I was like, I'm just done. I'm completely don't even want to look at it. He's like, I can't even imagine taking a drink. It just is out of his radar. I know for myself, like, I used to be like I wouldn't say like a problem drinker, but I definitely used it for like social anxiety to like numb out. I definitely used it in a way that maybe wasn't the healthiest. I just don't even have that kind of thing in my space. Like, I can take it or leave it. Like, I enjoy a drink or two sometimes, or I don't have to have it at all. Like, it doesn't
Right.
matter.
Yeah.
It's not, it doesn't, like, as Jerry from Rhythmia says, it doesn't have me anymore, where it used to kind of have me, there's a grip, there's a
It
grip, but
resonates. Yeah.
yeah,
And you can
yeah.
kind of see it in people too, and it resonates. Like that's how I used to be. I couldn't wait for the weekend. Now when someone offers me a drink, I'm like, obviously age just doesn't process very well, and I don't want to feel like shit the next day. But yeah, I'm like, why? It's like because I'm very much a social drinker as well. I could take it or leave it. So I love that description of it doesn't have me anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I know the transition for me is because when I go to Trader Joe's, I used to buy like 2 or 3 bottles every time I'd go to the store. I've not bought a bottle of wine in I don't know how long.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
not for like birthdays or whatever, but like not for myself or my husband.
Right,
It just
right.
I used to have
Yeah.
I have a wine fridge. It's full of kombucha. So
I love it.
God,
I love it. I love it. That's
yeah,
so fun. There's
yeah.
so many more stories. Like, I feel like I really want to share the one that I had at the end of the Wachuma story, because it's very witchy,
Yeah. I feel like you should as well. That's sort of the reason of the podcast. I think that would be very helpful because I think what you glean from it is really important to share.
So we also, in addition to the ayahuasca ceremonies, we had 2 Wachuma ceremonies, and I'll just kind of gloss over what Wachuma is because we could go much deeper into it. Wachuma is like a very beautiful plant medicine. It's very heart opening. It's very communal. Like I always say, like ayahuasca clears you out, and Wachuma fills you up with this with joy. And for me, like in our first ceremony, I got strength. I connected to the earth in this way where, like, I literally felt the strength of the mountains coming in. I was, oh, wow, I have not felt strong in my body for a long time. And it was what I was really seeking. There's so many beautiful parts of that ceremony that we can share. But what I really want to share is something that happened that felt a little dark, actually, at the time. And it came at the end of our last Wachuma ceremony, and we had it at this place called the Temple of the Moon. We had the Wachuma ceremonies during the day. It was just beautiful, just so much love, healing, just peace, joy, music, dancing, laughter. And then we had this fire. It became nighttime. We had this fire. And what I didn't share was on the way up to the site during the day, we had passed this haunted house, and it was very dark. So what I did was I got curious and I felt into the energy, and I went, oh God. But I didn't clear out. I just sort of, like, I felt the energy, and I almost felt like, in looking back, I allowed the energy to kind of be with me. And I've learned something really important that I'll share because it's very interesting. So I allowed this energy to kind of be with me, but I didn't know it. It wasn't conscious. I was just like, I wanted to feel, I got curious about what that energy was like in the house. And it wasn't anything that I would wish upon anybody. It was very dark and scary, really. And at the end of the Wachuma ceremony, we're sitting around the fire and everybody's just sharing, and there's all these beautiful shares, and it's all light filled. And then there's me sitting there, and I didn't share this with people, which in hindsight I should have shared, especially with the shamans so they can help. But I felt like something attached to my neck. I felt like I was almost being choked. And it felt to me like a female presence. It felt like I'll just say a dark witch. It just felt like somebody who was really into dark magic. And around my neck. And then all of a sudden, my thoughts went dark. And I've never had that experience where, like, I was like, I don't even know if I believe in possession. I don't know how I feel about that. But it was like someone had my mind and was like thinking these horrible thoughts about this beautiful woman who was next to me. And I was just, whoa, that's not me. And then these really dark thoughts about myself. And I'm like, these thoughts are not me. Whoever you are, get the F out of here. Like, you're not welcome here. You need to get out of my space. And then I just started going, who are you? Remember who you are. Remember who you are, Meika, your love, your light. I was like feeling connections. So I was calling in my angels, calling in my spirit guides, connecting to the beautiful shamans, connecting to the people around me, connecting to the stars and the star people, like anything I could think of that would remind me of my love and remind me of my essence and remind me of, like, who I truly am. And I kind of watched this woman walk away, just walk away. And so I thought, okay, I'm not going to share this with anybody. I think I removed her. And then I got really sick, like really sick. Like, I was throwing up at the end of the night when I went to sleep, and I ended up with COVID. And what I realized was that, like, I call her my dark angel, because at first I was, oh, that's so scary. This is it. You know, I don't want that in my space. And yes, it's true. I don't want that in my space. That's not what I choose to align with. But what she showed me was where I was out of alignment. And that was my intention going into Peru. I want to be more in alignment with my truth and myself and who I really am. And so what she was showing me was the places where I still entertain the darkness, and I still entertain maybe even negative thoughts about self or judgments of others. I'll entertain it. And so that was a really big lesson for me. And she also showed me, because she was so strongly in my space, of how to get back to my center, you know, because it was like I was fighting for my life, fighting for my mind, control of my mind for sure. Not that she could have like physically hurt me. I don't believe that, but definitely I was in a fight for where am I? What do I believe? Who am I? And so it rocket launched me into alignment. And so I was actually grateful for that experience, even though it was, you know, it was very dark. That night when I got sick, it was repetitive thoughts. I couldn't stop thinking about the house. It took a while to really move that energy out of me. I got a reading yesterday. I did an Akashic record reading because I am getting my marriage family therapy license. And I'm working under this therapist, and I was telling her about what had happened. And she said, you know, I feel like you just, because you got so sick, why don't you go to another spiritual badass and just see if there's anything still in the space? And sometimes we need help, you know, sometimes we all, you know, healers need other healers to help. And that's part of my thing, is like not asking for help when I need it. And like, oh, I could do this all by myself, not telling the shamans what was happening, which, you know, in hindsight, I really should have done that. So I go and I get this Akashic Records reading, and the woman is telling me that there was something that was cloaked in my field and was hiding. And then all of a sudden, I couldn't hear her. There was nothing wrong with the sound, but her voice was muffled as she's talking to me. And she's like, she does not want me to communicate with you. I'm like, I can tell it's hard for me to understand you right now. It's so weird. So she was doing all this work to clear. And she's like, okay, I got her. She's like, you're not welcome here. Boom. Sent her out. And then she was connecting to, like she said, your spine. There are other entities. And this, to me, I've been really not struggling, but pondering. How do I feel? What do I believe about other entities being able to attack? Part of me is like, no, that's a bunch of bull. You know what I mean? Like, I don't believe it. But then I have these things that happen where I'm like, oh, I guess it's a possibility, but I do believe that we all have the ability to clear no matter what. Like and that's what that taught me, was really getting in alignment with what I choose to have in my space. Apparently I need to ask for help, because this woman was like seeing all of these, she said, just entities attaching to my spine. And I've had a lot of spinal issues, and that she's like, because I said, why my spine? She's like, because that's your weak point. That's just your weak place. And I was like, okay. And so she's doing all of this clearing. And kind of at the end of the session, a big lesson for you is knowing what you can and can't handle, and being willing to say, I can't handle this, help, or I'm not doing this, not for me. And she said, you do this thing, which is an empath on steroids. When she called it blending, she's like, you blend. And I'm just curious if like other people that are listening to this understand this experience, because like it feels very unique, but I know I'm not the only one who does this. You're literally like taking in someone so deeply that you're becoming them, and it's hard to separate the self. And I feel like why I'm sharing that is because I feel like that's kind of what I did, and what allowed that other being to come into my space and stay, because I can blend. I'm doing it like on this unconscious level. So for me, the lesson is how to keep my sense of self, still be empathic, but not do the blending. And as she's sharing this with me, she's like, I also get that there's a part of you that feels like, oh, that's such a boring human experience. Yeah, I was like, yeah, I kind of feel that because it is kind of fun. I guess I do enjoy that. Like there's something that like feels very entertaining to me to
Like
get.
new. It's not your experience, it's someone else's. So there's a curiosity, I think, a natural.
Yeah, totally, totally. And I felt myself get so curious about that haunted house. I didn't really realize to the extent of what my curiosity was doing. So I have to figure out for me how to use this as a superpower and how to use it when I want to use it and not just like I did with the haunted house, just unconsciously blend and then have all this kind of darkness around me and have to, superpower it with other people's help out of my space.
Part of it is setting an intention that your personal spiritual rule is like you cannot come in unless you've been invited.
Yeah.
What it gets a little uncomfortable for people is the lack of control with something like this. And I think it's very, very simple, actually.
Yeah.
Just saying it or creating the statement or the demand or the intention about what you are comfortable with or what you're allowing into your space.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe I'm oversimplifying it, but
No, I do think you're right because it's funny because a lot of our clients are empaths and I've been talking to a lot of empaths about this. It's always like you teach what you need to learn, and that's comes out of my mouth a lot. It really is a lot more simple. It's just these ground rules that need to be laid down,
yeah.
and for me, I think that she called me out that there's some part of me because maybe there's competing intentions,
Sure.
it's
Yeah.
well, yeah, maybe I've laid some ground rules, but do I really want that? And really looking at what that is and how to make it as fun to be with, but not like, oh, like to like become,
Yeah.
it's different.
Right. It's almost like taking a bite of that chocolate bar after dinner versus eating the whole thing.
Exactly.
Like peeking around the corner, but you're not invited. Like I just, just
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to check and see who's knocking at my door, but
yeah,
if I'm not feeling it, you're not coming in.
right, right. I'm looking through the people, but you're not allowed to come through the people.
Yeah, exactly. I think maybe that'll be my like my image, like
Yes.
I'll have like a little peephole at the edge of my aura.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. And then you're slamming that little cover shut.
yeah.
I'm good.
Yeah. No, thank you.
Exactly. Oh, you sound like you're a natural method actor, what actors do when they become their character. It sounds very similar to that.
Well, that was my original. That's what I went when I did all my undergrad. It was dramatic arts. That's what I loved to do. Probably would have been once I understood this, I probably could have become pretty good at it if I kept going.
Right? Yeah, I mean, it seems like you wouldn't have had a choice. Like you were letting it kind of take over your space.
Right. Right. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. It's so interesting, but it's been such a big lesson because for me, it's, well, who am I? My acupuncturist is like, she said this several months ago. She's like, for you, I feel like it's like really understanding and embodying the I am presence, like your particular flavor of the I am presence and filling your whole being with that, moving everyone else who has you've allowed to take residence in your space out, and so this woman yesterday, she's like, I'm almost doing little sacred energetic surgeries on you because I'm moving things out and then we're suturing it up. And, it's like, I'm just like, my energetic body is like coming back to me. And so it was a huge lesson that I still haven't unpacked all of it. And that I'm still really learning how to move through space with knowing that I do this. And also knowing like, I don't believe we're given anything that's not a gift, like these kind of spiritual or I mean they're almost like supernatural kind of powers, like I feel like they're very purposeful, but some of them feel like how you felt. I don't want this at first, you know what I mean? But it's like, how do you move through space knowing that this is part of your purpose and why? Like why are certain things there and how should I use them? How do I use that? How is that here to serve?
Right.
There's a reason, and I will I'll continue to uncover it, I'm sure.
How does your physical body feel after that session with her?
I felt a little sore today. Like I was like, oh, my spine feels sore. And I would imagine, I mean, if you have a surgery and you're healing your sore. She's like, basically putting like an energetic band-aid all down your spine. I'm like, okay,
How about some
okay.
Teflon? Let's like put some Teflon around that spine.
Yeah, totally. Oh, she gave me, I want to share one more thing about this because she gave me such a good empath tool that I never thought about. She's like, you know how a lot of times as an empath, you feel like you're on the defensive space. I got to, I got to shield up so
Right.
nothing can get in. She's like, you can actually take your shield and turn it inside out. And now you're on the offense. You've got these little punchers. Like if anything comes in, you're on the offense. You don't necessarily have to be defending yourself. And I was like, ooh, I like that image of turning my shield inside out. For something about that, it feels more powerful in some way.
Yeah, remember how you were saying when we were talking, you're like shield up, shine out, or shoot out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. I love it. I love it. Yeah. So if you feel an energetic punch from me, anybody, that's what's happening.
What I wanted to share, the concept of the sacred surgeries in ayahuasca that you
Oh,
talked about, which I think is a really fascinating possibility for someone going into a ceremony and taking the medicine, because it sounds so, I mean, it is out of this world, but it just sounds so hard for most people to grasp. For me, buckets into the suspension of disbelief.
totally.
But yeah, go ahead, please. I would love for you to just.
I remember my first before I had taken ayahuasca, and I'm already like, I mean, I've got some out there beliefs for sure, and so I'm already coming from an out there belief structure. And I remember my first conversation where somebody was telling me the possibility of having a sacred surgery, and the sacred surgeries are done by beings that are not of this world. So they were talking about them as like they're basically aliens that are doing these sacred surgeries. And I'm like, okay, this is getting weird. Like, this is getting really weird. I'm like, I'm open to it, and it was exciting for me, but I was thinking, God, people who really are a little more, okay, I got to see it to believe it, that kind of a thing. I'm like, I wonder what they're thinking right now. I have just gone to the loony bin. And then I experienced a sacred surgery. And basically, a sacred surgery is there's something that has happened, some sort of a trauma, and it can be this life, past life, but it is stored in your body. And there are these beings, and they're different people see different beings. I've had actually several different. One looked like I couldn't see the beings, but it looked like an operating room, but almost if you were an operating room in a spaceship, the walls were like a different shape, but all of these I don't know, metal like plates kind of things started coming out from the walls. And then my body went numb, almost like the feeling of Novocaine in the dentist. It was just about my whole body. And I heard this like, and then something started to happen. I believe it was around my teeth, because they say like that happens a lot. The shamans say that when you're little, the pain of the family is held in your gums. So a lot of people have these sacred surgeries on their gums. So that was one. And then another one was like these little kind of octopus looking creatures came in, and I had past life sexual trauma. And in this life, I came in with like major bladder infections. Like when I was, I think 3 or 4 years old, I had to have surgery. And so I came in with all this bladder stuff, and they said, these beings told me in the ceremony that it was because of the sexual trauma from a past life, and that they were going to go in and heal. And so they did. And my relationship to like sexuality and like males, like everything kind of shifted. So there was a lot of healing that happened. I've had friends who had cancerous tumors that have had sacred surgeries, and one I believe it was in his brain, and he did ayahuasca, had a sacred surgery, and the tumor was gone. And the doctors were like, okay, whatever you're doing, continue to do it. Keep taking that medication, because he was supposed to be taking some medication, which he wasn't taking. He just didn't tell them, but they're like, it's gone. It's, our drugs are working. So it's very, very interesting. And a couple of people had sacred surgeries on our Peru trip too.
They sure did. Another person who had uterus issues, and she said that they asked permission if they could crawl up in there and
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah, and that's the thing. And the reason why I think it's important to bring up is because in case people are considering having an ayahuasca ceremony, or maybe you've had one and you've had something like that happen, but you don't know what's happening. Like, because I said I like the day before our first ayahuasca ceremony, I said, I feel like I need to tell people about sacred surgeries. And people who had been taking ayahuasca a lot had never heard of that. And so they were like going, oh my gosh, I wonder if that was what was happening. But I was scared because there were like beings coming at me that I didn't know what they were about. And usually in my experience, one of the participants said that they asked permission. Like they kind of told me what they were going to do in one. And in another one, it was just sort of like I went numb and then it happened. So I can see how if no one tells you, hey, this could happen, and it's actually something that's really healing, then if no one talked about it, it could be something that's just, it could feel very scary or invasive, or someone's trying to take over. Is your intention good? Like there's all those thoughts. And so the people ended up having sacred surgeries in our ceremony, and they were like, I'm glad that you said something, because now I know what that was. And maybe I would have been scared if somebody didn't say anything. So I think it is important to share that, because it's a good possibility.
Yeah, I love that you'd share that because you just don't know. And for someone who's never done it before going into it, you obviously want as much information as possible because we're all so uncomfortable with the unknown and not having any degree of understanding of what could occur. Every time I hear of someone who has cancer or is sick, I'm just like, God, when can this go mainstream? When can people break through this wall? The best documentary that I've watched that helps kind of dispel all of this is How to Change Your Mind on Netflix
Mm.
with Michael Pollan, and it shows the whole political view on why psychedelics and plant medicine are a Schedule C drug, because Nixon essentially wanted Vietnam recruits. The peace and love movement was happening, and he was trying to break that up. So he demonized something. Like, how do you demonize plants that come from the ground? Sometimes I want people to hear themselves talk. You'd rather take man-made pharmaceuticals from a lab that just numbs your symptom, doesn't fix it, over something that could make the actual issue go away permanently. It blows
Right.
my mind sometimes. I'm just, wake up, everybody.
Well, I think it's the power of the media, one demonization of that. And people are like, oh, druggies. I remember, when I first came on the internet and started sharing about my ayahuasca ceremonies, some of my mom's friends were, tell her not to talk about that on the internet. Like it just is not a good look. I'm talking about a plant and a healing experience. Like, believe
Yeah,
me, it's not fun. There's
yeah.
nothing fun
No,
about, or well, I mean, I can't say there's nothing fun about it, but it's not always an easy experience. A party drug? No, not really.
yeah. And I mean, I think that's part of why us talking about it right now, I mean, there's a million podcasts, we know this, but to help wake people up a little bit who are slightly bit interested in trying to understand something different than, that hasn't been working for them. If that's just part of our kind of roadmap as well. I feel very strongly about normalizing very natural ways of resolving health issues. It doesn't be such a struggle. There's so many factors that play into things, why people get sick in the first place. And there's just so many angles
Sure.
about why these things occur. Pent up anger, not being able to release out of your body, and how it can dense up into cells and turn malignant. Or whether your soul is like, I want to know what it's like to have that experience, and it's part of a greater cause. Maybe they wouldn't cure a cancer if not enough people had it. So there's always a purpose or a reason behind everything, and the mentality part is such a huge part. You don't have to be a victim regardless of what circumstance you have. You can choose to see the good in everything. There are so many themes that came out over the week. The main one was the contrast and the clarity. So the entity that you encountered, having that dark angel perspective to get the alignment that you needed. Like, everything needs balance. One of the messages too is, as horrible as it is to see a lot of war and death and famine or all these horrible things, it's all part of the cycle of life. And it's not to say that I'm for it, not at all. You don't ever want to see people suffer. Having the bigger picture that sometimes we need such strong contrast to rectify it and to see what we need.
I think that's the hardest one to get. And I still have a hard time. Do I really believe that. It's really hard. When I was studying spiritual psychology and getting my master's, and my professors were just amazing gurus. I felt like just such beautiful people. They were talking about how we don't have the spiritual records, the spiritual access to the records to why these atrocious things happen on the planet. We just have to trust that there is a divine purpose to all of this. And people were just, I mean, I've never seen the class just up in arms. You're saying that Hitler's is okay. And they're like, I'm just saying that we don't have we don't have access to see what's behind all of this. What are the lessons? What are the opportunities? It's not like I'm condoning anything, but there's got to be there has to be. I just have to believe that there is that contrast somehow brings us more light,
Yes, the contrast is for the clarity and have the right alignment and goal, for what we want. But like, if you never knew what it felt like to be hungry, then you wouldn't appreciate your meal. If you never knew what it felt like to be cold, you wouldn't appreciate that jacket a little bit more. So it's all part of the process. And one of the interesting bits that came out of ceremony that one of our fellow participants shared was how, and I liked his interpretation of it, but that aliens also have a play in what happens here and help prevent us from like going totally atomic. The example that was brought up was when Japan had that nuclear meltdown that all went into the ocean. What happened with that? You know what I mean? Like they actually extracted some of the radiation because otherwise like half the planet would have died.
Right.
So it was an example where you're like, oh, that's interesting because it did fall out of the media very quickly.
I mean, that's such an interesting concept. And I mean, it sounds so kind of out there, but I really do believe that there are other beings out there that are helping us and they're with us. And when I was 20, I got these like downloads when I didn't even know what a download was. And I didn't know what Pleiadians were or the Pleiades star system. Right? I had no idea, but I started getting these messages about just that, about how there were beings that were around us that were helping us through this big shift in consciousness. And I was just, what is going on? And so I started reading books and people who had channeled Pleiadians. And I'm just like, wow, their message is so beautiful. And apparently, according to these channelings, they are our future. So if our karma is tied to theirs, so if we do really destructive things, it affects them. So it's like we're all intertwined here. So yes, they are here out of love, but there's something at stake for them too if we choose another path. So they're like, we're sending you waves of love. Yeah. We're gonna shield all of your nuclear activity so you don't blow up the planet.
Yeah. How did you learn that word though? I think you were saying it was a knowing because that's such a specific word, Pleiadian.
Yeah. So it just started to happen kind of like ayahuasca. I was definitely getting this story happening and I was writing it down. And then my two girlfriends were getting the same story. And we were like, what? It was so weird. We're like, what's happening to us? Why do we all understand this story? And then I believe it was channeled in. And then I started meeting people that would say, like this guy at a gas station, he looked homeless, kind of. I mean, his energy was, I don't know. And he started washing my windshield. And he had this necklace on that looked like it was from another planet. I said, what is that? He goes, oh, I'm from the Andromeda galaxy. And he's like, well, you should know, you're Pleiadian. There's the word again. Okay. And then my friend was getting the same story. Her friend just dropped off one of these, her name's Barbara Marciniak. I have it like, here's one of the books, Family of Light. Well, there we go. Family of Light. But Barbara Marciniak channels these Pleiadian energies. And the friend was just like, oh, I thought you might enjoy this book. And we're like, what? Here's the Pleiadians again. What's happening? It's so weird. It's so bizarre. It's so bizarre. But it gives me hope.
Yeah,
Because
but
we
all those like cues, I think, is what's so beautiful about life if you're paying attention and not writing it off as, oh, that's weird, but actually paying attention and then doing something with it. Like where,
Oh yeah. I mean, I was gobbling up the books. I was like, oh my God, it was just so fascinating. And also talking about what was happening, they're like, you're gonna move into the absurd times where it just feels like absurd. And I kind of feel like we're sort of in it. Like, really? What is going on here? But all of the books ended with a beautiful new earth. So that's what I'm holding. That all
happen.
of this craziness is for something, and that
Yes.
we will end up in a beautiful place with our the help of our Pleiadian and whatever other beautiful beings are helping us along this journey.
Yes,
Do
yes.
it.
I know we have our weekly integrations, our group integrations to talk about stuff. It's just so gratifying to put it out there with you and share our experience. And if it helps any other people scratch an itch to understand something better, I'm all for it.
For sure. 100%.
Well, this concludes our 5th episode of Hey Boo in Peru, special edition. We leave you with may the divine hold and protect you.
And may you remember your magic.
And so it is. Until next time.
Bye.